Tom Pelissero from NFL Network and the NFL Insiders back here on the Rich Eisen Show. Good to see you, Tom.
Good to see you, Rich.
Is there anything else you want to say, Tom?
No, last week you made a big deal of me saying hello to the boys in the studio, but then, so I thought maybe this time I'd see if they said hello first.
Okay.
But now, now it's all gotten awkward.
Okay.
All right. What's up, the boys in the studio?
So we're playing middle
on?
school games here,
doing?
Tom. Is that what's happening?
No, don't forget how this started, Tom, is you not speaking to us. So,
Guys, let me just be the adult in the room and step in here.
Let me tell you, I haven't texted Tom once about A.J. Brown this week, okay?
That's because you
growth.
already know the answer.
That is growth.
I haven't texted Tom since the last time he was on this show during his interview, and I sent him a video of me saying hi to him.
And excuse me.
During the interview.
You didn't text him about A.J. Brown. You texted him about Jahan Dotson, which is worse. Okay? Let's be honest and accurate here, which is why he's not saying hello to you.
I asked him if I
What
should
was the
pick
stat
up.
line for Jahan Dotson on Monday night there, Brockman?
Well, I didn't play him. I played Roma Dunze instead, just as bad.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this portion of pettiness of the Tom Pelissero hit.
The Pelissero petty meters.
That's the petty ball. All right. Tom, what do you know about Justin Jefferson's readiness? Because I believe you're doing the Vikings and Texans game for NFL Game Day morning for us, correct? You'll be there on Sunday?
I will be out there on Sunday. I
Okay.
was at the Vikings practice facility yesterday, making a fairly rare appearance over there, as everyone let me know. Justin Jefferson was on the practice field, but he was not really dressed for practice. I saw photos of him today, kind of dressed the same way. It seems like they're really limiting him through the course of the week here. He's got a quad bruise. Those can be problematic at times when you talk to doctors about them, just because they can be really painful. They can lead to stiffness. You can lose range of motion. Jefferson, when he talked to reporters, said that he for sure intends to play here. There's obviously different things you can do on game day to try to loosen that thing up. So at this point, I would anticipate that he's going to go. How effective is he actually going to be in a pretty big game against Houston? That remains to be seen.
Okay, and so 49ers just emerged beat up from losing in Minnesota. George Kittle wound up on the injury report with not practicing with a hamstring, on top of Debo being out, on top of McCaffrey being out. I guess tell me about Kittle, whatever you might know, and about what the Niners are going to do offensively and how they're going to perform if they change anything up. Tom?
Well, Kittle was actually carted off in the game on Sunday. They attributed it to cramps. The thing is, when you get cramps in your hamstring, sometimes that turns out to be an actual injury and not just a matter of dehydration. So, yeah, I mean, the 49ers are really beat up. The Rams are really beat up. If you were looking at this, I think most people on the outside would have said if anybody in the NFC West is going to challenge the 49ers this year, it's going to be the Rams. But think about this. The Rams have no Puka Nacua. He's on IR. Cooper Kupp is not expected to play for at least a couple of weeks here. They got 4 offensive linemen who are on injured reserve. And then flip side of that, everybody you just mentioned, no Christian McCaffrey. Remember, they lost their number 2 running back, Elijah Mitchell, to a season-ending injury back in training camps. They're playing with their number 3 back right now. You've got no Deebo Samuel at this point. George Kittle, we'll see exactly what his designation ends up being on the injury report. But that's a lot of firepower that's not expected to be on the field, all of which, if I'm sitting there and I'm Mike McDonald in Seattle or I'm Jonathan Gannon in Arizona, I know there's a long way to go. You got 15 more games. The 49ers seem to go through this cycle all the time. Every other year, they'll have a very healthy year or just a total disaster of injuries. This so far looks like the disaster of injuries type of year, but you got to think, hey, we might have a little bit of an opening, especially with the way the Cardinals looked on offense last week, and Seattle, even with, still kind of growing, it's not entirely pretty at this point. They've done enough to win so far for a new coach.
And what about Jordan Love? He was practicing in pads, and he called himself hopeful. What do you know about him right now?
So he's been out there all 3 days. That's generally a good sign. It seems like, the Packers are historically a very conservative medical team, but the fact that he's able to go out there and go through as much as he is would indicate that he's largely got a green light, at least in terms of testing that injury in practice. In the end, Jordan Love also has to make a decision here because the advice, the medical staff can clear him, but if he doesn't feel like I can function, I can protect myself, then, frankly, he shouldn't put himself onto the field. Matt LaFleur has already said they're going to take this all the way up until 90 minutes before kickoff. I would anticipate that by tomorrow morning, LaFleur is going to have a really good idea who his starting quarterback is going to be. Last week, Rich, everybody thought it was just pure gamesmanship, but they really thought, hey, if Jordan Love wakes up feeling good on Sunday morning with no practice, we'll play him. The same goes here. Now he's actually getting some of those practice reps. How he feels through, how his body responds, how the knee responds to 3 days of practice is going to guide a lot of that here. In the end, if the medical staff signs off, it's going to come down to Jordan Love. The original timetable was 3 to 6 weeks. This would be like 15 days, 16 days after the injury, so certainly on the bottom end of that timeline, but they were always optimistic. Other guys play with MCL sprains. You can brace it up. You just got to make sure, it's probably not going to get worse. That's the thing about MCL sprains, particularly for quarterbacks, but you got to make sure you can go out there and function and not put yourself at risk of taking a different type of hit that might give you another injury.
From January all the way through to August, all we talked about were how the Cowboys reacted to getting boat raced out of the playoffs at home by the Packers, and last week's loss to New Orleans had the same markings, essentially. And how are the Cowboys spending their week rebounding with the Ravens, desperate at 0-2 coming in, Tom?
Mike McCarthy's really good at pushing the buttons with his team when they've had a poor performance. And you've seen that a number of times since he got to Dallas. You obviously saw it in Green Bay. Usually when they have that type of totally flat performance, they come out the following week and they play well. Obviously, you'd like to avoid the type of performance they had last week against the Saints. And I agree. That felt like the Packers game where you had a sense in the first quarter, like this is bad and it's not going to get better for that team. Injury-wise, they've obviously had some big names pop up on the report this week. I was told, the moment that CD popped up with the ankle injury, this is not anything significant. I know Jerry Jones was on the radio like he is practically every day and said that he's not concerned with it. Trayvon Diggs also, same thing. Sounds like he's going to be okay for the game. So they're a little bit nicked up, but, overall they're healthy here. This is not Mike McCarthy's never been a just scream at the guys all week type of coach, but he is going to push them. He is going to challenge them as men to come out and put something better on tape. But you're going up against a Ravens team that, arguably has more on the line than you do. I mean, the Ravens, I don't believe have ever started 0-3. Not under John Harbaugh anyway. They've only started 0-2 a couple of times here. You're really putting yourself in a hole if you lose this game. For Dallas, you're not really in a hole in the division because, frankly, the whole division right now seems like it's got some issues here. But that would be a big win. They need that type of signature win coming off of the loss that they just had to the Saints. I fully expect, again, based on McCarthy's history, they're going to come out and play well.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. Any sense how the Chiefs are going to split up the carries with Isiah Pacheco out? Kareem Hunt is not playing. He's on the practice squad. They just signed him. So is this an NBC Sunday night debut of the Carson Steele show? I mean, what do we got, Tom?
We've already had a lot of Carson Steele here, Rich. Going back to the preseason, he was not just because of the hair, but because of how he played. We've seen a little bit of him. He had the fumble last week, but they put him right back into the game, which shows that they've got a level of trust that you don't often see in a guy who's an undrafted rookie coming out and joining the team. I would expect you to see a lot of Samaje Perine as well. He's a steady back. He's played a lot of football. He's good in pass protection. This is also, Rich, and I don't mean to be reductive about one of the greatest coaches in NFL history, but Andy Reid really doesn't want or need to run the ball a whole lot. It's always been the thing everybody said is, if he would pass the ball 70 times a game if he could. They might do that, not 70, but they might just throw the heck out of the ball this week against the Falcons here. Atlanta's got a veteran secondary. I would anticipate that they're going to challenge them. They've got so much speed around Patrick Mahomes. There's other ways. One way that you can make up for the run game, Rich, when you don't have it is you just get the ball onto the perimeter to your playmakers, and those are almost, the bubbles and the smoke screens. Those are almost like running type of plays. So I would anticipate that they cook up some things like that. Maybe you see some more of those reverses and the easy touches, the manufactured touches for guys like Xavier Worthy. I fully anticipate they're going to have a plan, and it's probably going to be a pretty fun one.
Quarterbacks in Chargers-Steelers. Tell me about Justin Herbert's ankle, and then, if you don't mind, transitioning yourself into the conversation about Justin Fields, Tom, and how Tomlin has been handling everything. I mean, let's start with the first order of business, Justin Herbert.
Justin Herbert, going back to when he got banged up in the game, there was optimism that he was going to be okay, but they were looking at his foot, his ankle, his shin on the bench. The Chargers are calling it an ankle injury at this point. According to locals on the scene at practice today, he was heavily spatted up. He had a ton of tape on that ankle. He was working on the side while everybody else was out there on the field. But Justin Herbert is the type of veteran quarterback who may not need to practice in order to play. They're going to have to make some decisions, just like we've seen with other quarterbacks here, in terms of, do you want to roll him out this week, or do you want to give him, at a time you're 2-0 and you've mostly done it through the running game, do you want to just give him a week and put Easton Stick out there? This one might be another one that really goes into Saturday and even Sunday before they make a final decision here. But certainly at this point, they have not ruled out Justin Herbert. And in terms of the Steelers, it's going to be Justin Fields again this week. You've heard Mike Tomlin repeatedly say, his participation is not to an extent that we need to consider it. And so hypotheticals are a waste of time. Those are Tomlinisms for we're going to keep, easing this guy back because we're playing winning football, and why put him on the field before he's 100%. I would say this, to the extent that some people are going to say, hey, Justin Fields may never give the job back. Why would they pull him out? That's true right now in the short term. But remember, they've also scored 31 points total over the first two games. They're not going up and down the field. I know they had some penalties that called things back last week, but this is not like a dominant offense. Absolutely, Justin Fields is playing the way that they wanted Russell Wilson to, which is protect the football, don't make the big mistakes, don't turn it over, rely on the ground game, rely on the defense. And that's going to be enough to get you by in a lot of cases here. But they also haven't had to play from behind. They haven't been in a situation where Justin Fields has to drop back and win a game with his arm. That, in my mind, leaves the door open here. I still believe we're probably going to see Russell Wilson at some point this season. As long as they're winning, there's reason to believe that they'll continue to roll with Justin Fields. But they do want to see that offense play better here. And so this is going to very much remain, it seems, a week-to-week type of situation.
Is Tua traveling with the Dolphins to Seattle, Tom?
Tua is traveling to Seattle for the game this weekend. He's been, according to all the quotes from players, in a lot of the meetings, and he's been around the facility. Raheem Mostert said today that they went to Disney World together, which I'm hoping Tua has the wherewithal to not get on, Space Mountain or something.
Yeah, Mr. Toad's wild. I got to be honest with you, man. Like Mr. Toad's wild ride or a 6-hour plane flight from Miami to Seattle doesn't sound like the first orders of business for somebody who was IR'd for a concussion in the fourth of his career. I'm not making light of it, Tom, but like, what's up? Like, what is up?
Well, first of all, on a less serious note, Rich, I would say the fact you're citing Mr. Toad's wild ride would indicate to me, as somebody who's been to Disney several times, that you're on the high roller list where you pay to make sure you can get to the front of those lines, not just the pass to get you halfway.
Tom, I chose it. Lanes. I chose a herky-jerky ride, one that can have quick twists and turns that one would think...
That would long line for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I've never been on it. I would have 90 minutes with my kids in the line.
It would throw off anyone's equilibrium, Tom. It's It's a Small World would be something that would be for the speed of somebody that you would think doesn't need to be on any rides. And like I said, though, what's up? What's the scoop with this thing?
My understanding is, Tua's already traveled to visit at least one specialist. So in terms of plane travel, it's something he did back in 2022. He flew to go visit the specialist as well. The treatment of concussions has progressed. It's no longer go sit in a dark room for a week. There's different things that they do through the course of the process here. And so, the Disney trip is a little bit of a perhaps a red herring in all this, but the fact that he's traveling with the team, you have to take it as a positive because it means that the team doctors have cleared him to do so. There's no rush for him to pass through the concussion protocol here, which would involve clearance by an independent neurologist. He's on injured reserve. That means that he's not planned for 4 games, which goes beyond because they also have a bye week that's in that stretch as well here. But, I said this on Monday, Rich, there's no reason to believe that Tua won't pass through the concussion protocol. It's all this additive stuff that he's going to be doing in terms of evaluating with specialists and talking with his family here. The bottom line is, if he is told that he has a healthy brain, then there's reason to believe that he is going to push forward here and be back on the field, quite likely later on this season. They're not there yet. That's why he's continuing to gather the information, and the Dolphins put him on IR, not because there was no way he could have been cleared before the bye week and gotten back in 3 games, but more so because they want him to take his time. They want to take, as Mike McDaniel put it, the stress, the anxiety away of talking about his future in football terms here. They really want to give him some time. He's got the next month, but he's staying engaged with the team, which is one more sign that this is a guy who fully intends, when he gains the medical clearance, to be back on the football field.
2 last ones for you, Tom Pelissero. Your reporting on David Tepper's hand or role in the benching of Bryce Young is what?
My understanding is, to give you the timeline, going back to Sunday, Dave Canales goes to the podium after the game, after another just brutal performance all around, not just by Bryce Young, but by the offense. The defense is super undermanned. They've given up a lot of points here. The whole thing has not looked good through the first 2 weeks. He's asked repeatedly about, is Bryce going to start? Is he going to play in Vegas? Dave Canales says, Bryce is our quarterback. That night, Canales goes and he starts watching the tape. And what he sees is not somebody who, in his mind, should be starting NFL games right now. And so he comes in the office the next morning. He does speak with Dan Morgan. That was a conversation that was ongoing for about, the 24 hours leading up to the final decision. Certainly, when you're talking about benching the guy who was the number 1 overall pick that you traded up for in the draft like 17 months ago, that's going to involve a conversation at the ownership level with David Tepper. But this was Dave Canales' decision here. And Rich, as you peel back the layers on this a little bit, I think that you have a situation where Dave Canales, and I've not talked directly to Dave about this, but you seem to have a situation where when you're a new coach and you're trying to gain the credibility in the locker room and you don't have the success out of the gate here, you're thinking about the dynamics of a player basically being on the field because he's on scholarship. And Bryce Young was playing because he was the number 1 overall pick. Dave Canales was brought in part because they needed to get Bryce Young turned around. And everything we heard from Canales, he came on the Insiders back in March and talked about breaking it down in terms of the footwork, how they were going to rebuild him from the ground up. You watched it through the first 2 games. I certainly don't think anyone looking objectively would say it got better. You can quite possibly say it looked worse. So then how, after those 2 games, are you coming back in and looking Adam Thielen in the eye, looking Deontay Johnson in the eye, looking some of those other veterans in the eye and saying, we still believe Bryce Young gives us the best chance to win? It's not to say that we will never see Bryce Young take a snap for the Panthers again. Shoot, he's going to dress as the number 2. If something happens to Andy Dalton this week, Young is going to be right back into the lineup. But when we saw Andy Dalton on the field last year in December in Seattle, he played at a pretty high level. He played well. Him and Thielen were playing what Bryce Young later called dad ball. They were just, it was 2 veteran, savvy dudes who were connecting, and they got the football around. That's what they want to see. You're facing Patrick Graham this week, the Raiders defensive coordinator, one of the toughest guys schematically to face in the NFL, who just got the better of Lamar Jackson and the Ravens 1 week ago. At least put a guy out there in Andy Dalton who you think, hey, this guy can get the ball to some of the other players. Maybe it doesn't look better. Maybe it's bad again. And maybe they turn back to Bryce Young in the not too distant future. The strange part about this, there's a lot of strange parts about this, Rich, but you go back 5 years ago, Andy Dalton, after 7 seasons and change as the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, was benched because the Bengals at the time wanted to get a look at their rookie quarterback who was named Ryan Finley. And Finley was so bad in that opportunity that he got benched again for Andy Dalton. And then, by the way, Ryan Finley never played in the NFL again, was released and never popped up again in his NFL career. So Dalton has seen the other side of this. He's got an opportunity, go out, function, and he can probably buy himself another 5 years in the league, like those former starters who are willing to be backups do.
All right, in the last 2 minutes I have with you, I'll give you the floor, your impressions of the first result of Week 3, Jets and Patriots. Tom, what is that?
Well, I think realistically, this is probably what the Patriots are. You go back to Week 1 and they beat the Bengals. That was a Bengals team that was in a disarray that week. They didn't know until game day, is Jamar Chase playing? Is he not? They designed the game plan thinking they had T. Higgins, and then he gets hurt on the Thursday, and then suddenly you don't have him on the field either. It's not excuses. Everybody's got injuries, but that was probably not the best shot that the Bengals had. Plus, they're facing a new coaching staff with new schemes and things. That was a strange game. Good for the Patriots that they won that game. But last night, you kind of saw, these are the shortcomings of the team. I heard you talking with Brockman before I came on about, why Drake May is on the field. I had some of the same thoughts. Although, low leverage situation there, you're probably calling plays where he's not going to find himself in too much harm's way. But Jacoby Brissett, go back through Jacoby's career. He's had a long career because he's well-liked in the locker room, because he's a tough dude and a smart dude, but he's never been a winning quarterback in the NFL. Even a couple of years ago when he got his opportunity in Cleveland, and he drew rave reviews for just giving them a chance before, when they didn't have Deshaun Watson on the field. They won 4 games. He went 4-7 as the starter that season, and the shortcoming for Jacoby Brissett, going back to even his starting days in Indianapolis, was he'll see it. He's smart enough to see it. He doesn't always pull the trigger. And last night he threw for 90-something yards in the game. He's thrown for like 360 over 3 games here. He's never going to be a cut it loose and let guys go make the plays down the field style of quarterback. Drake May ultimately is going to be that guy. I thought what Gerard Mayo said today was fair, which was, and Alex Van Pelt reiterated this, which was, Jacoby showed grit and toughness, and Drake probably benefits more from being the number 2 quarterback at this point. On the Jets side of things, and Rich, I'm sure that you enjoyed last night as much as you have any primetime Jets game in about the past decade here. This reminded me, and I know it's an easy comparison because they were together in Green Bay, but this reminded me of Brett Favre in 2009, where the first 2 games of that season, this was after he had gone to the Jets and suffered a season-ending injury, or he played, but he had a biceps injury that really kind of shut him down. He didn't play the same after the thrilling Week 1 game against the Chad Pennington Dolphins. In 2009, he came in, and the Vikings actually won their first 2 games, but it wasn't like light him up. Favre was efficient. They were on the road, but it was a lot of just hand the ball off to Adrian Peterson, and that was kind of the style that they played. Week 3, they played the 49ers, and that was the Greg Lewis game where Favre had to go punch for punch, and that was a 49ers team that entered 2-0, and he throws to Greg Lewis in the back of the end zone, and you kind of went like, oh, like this might be a real thing in Minnesota. The Jets last night weren't facing that caliber of an opponent, but you've watched Rodgers. I almost just called him Favre, and you kind of went like, oh, maybe this is he channels it for one more season here after not wanting to go out the way that he did last year. Maybe he's got it. I mean, that end zone view of the social media person shooting it on an iPhone in the corner of the end zone where the ball's coming right into Garrett Wilson. I mean, that's old school Rodgers. He doesn't look like he moves quite the same way. He is certainly not going to scramble, especially after he took that hit when he didn't quite get out of bounds and got smacked a little bit there. But he's so smart. He sees it. He still has one of the quickest releases in the NFL, and then he can make those types of throws. A big thing for that Jets team is going to be belief and confidence, and that's kind of what waned last year. Even though they started out 3-3, they weren't dead and buried, but you didn't have that level of confidence when Zach Wilson was in there. When Rodgers plays like that, and when you've got the city behind you that, as everybody knows, can be a tough fan market, it can be a tough media market, all of a sudden you got some positivity surrounding the New York Jets. This is what we've been waiting for. Is it going to be as special as that 2009 Viking season was, right up until Favre, instead of settling for a 50-plus yard field goal, threw across his body to Tracy Porter in the NFC Championship game? We'll find out, but it was fun to watch last night, and I think it's going to be really fun to watch the rest of the season.
All right, who wants to say goodbye first?
Bye, Tom.
All right.
Bye, Tom.
Bye, Brogman.
Ladies and gentlemen,
TJ.
Tom Pelissero, everybody.
Not
as awkward.
It's filler here today, Tom.
It's Tom Pelissero, everybody. Very
Friday,
good.
Texas
Tommy
weekend.
P. We'll
Friday
see him
with
on
Philly.
game day morning with Vikings in Texas. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.